you saw you and
the Torah brings down Siman Tov Samach. Ubale Meister v'Chasidim machmirim al atzmon kegoynim hamachmirim v'loshim ba'atzmon v'oifen k'raminon mardake shaloni humasik v'ishta'oifa l'chem mitzvah kol odom l'shtadol v'asiyas hamasas ba'afiyosim v'chein hoi noyig adoin yovei rosh shem mishtadol behem v'oimen al asiyosim u'mizaris ha'iskus behem v'oim misayeh barichosim. Because the Torah brings down the Rosh himself was Isaac in the matzahs and was mizaris and standing on top of the people. I'm sure the Rosh had a lot of good things to do, but Alpha Pik, and he took off time to mishtadol the matzahs, and this is brought down the Shulchan Aruch. The Vice is telling you that's the right hanoga. The Mechaber brings down the Tov Samar, Siv Beis, Salach and Shulchan Aruch. A Rosh hay mishtadol the mitzvahs, matzahs mitzvah, ba'im el asiyason, mizaris oiskim em esayeh barichosim v'chein roi l'chol adam la'asois l'toblu ba'atzma b'matzah. Now the Mishabur brings down, because the mitzvah boy yosim mishluchay, as somewhere Mr. Krelitz, he says that really normally you find mitzvah boy yosim mishluchay. That's why Shabbos, and it says a person should do some machanas for Shabbos, but it doesn't say over there that a person should mishtadol so much. It says vices over here by matzahs is a bigger inyan than normally, and that's why a person should mishtadol by himself. So we're going to try to go through a little bit the inyan of matzahs. Now the first question everyone always has is when they're baking matzahs, what's the big asik for baking the matzahs? Everyone knows that it takes 18 minutes for something to come chametz. So it takes 18 minutes to come chametz. From the beginning of the process, the matzah bakery until they finish, everyone knows the matzah bakery, like after 18 minutes, the whole process stops and they clean everything. So what's the shayla? There's no shayla of chimut. So we'll try to be mazbah a little bit what's going on and what the zehirasim are, what can be done to make things, I guess, as best as possible. So first thing, follow for the Mishnah, Pesachim Daf Mem Vav. The Mishnah says like this: Betzek hacherish, v'miyesh ki yoytze boy shehichmitz harazei also. What does it mean Betzek hacherish? Rashi says the Mishnah Daf Mem Ches brings down different simoni chimuts. Look over there. The Mishnah brings down different simoni chimuts that a person sees these simonim know that the matzah came chametz. What happens if it's a betzek cherish? Rashi says that it's not nikur if it's hechmet. It's meshona, like a cherish that has a znayin, has ears, and doesn't hear. So this thing also is meshona, that it's not showing us any simoni chimut. So you don't know what you don't know. The chametz is not. So Rashi, the Gemara says, Mishnah says, that means you have another isa that you start at the same time. It's the exact same place, and you see that came chametz. So we can assume that this one also came chametz. The more continues, what happens? Let's say you don't have another Isa. You only have one Isa. So now what are you going to do? I don't know. So the Gemara, which is the Shea Mill. More goes to exactly what that's the Shea Mill. Like upon him, the Gemara is that if you don't see someone in Chimutz and you don't have another matzah to compare it to if you have Shimon Echimot, the law is that we go with a Shea Mill. And so we bring the Mechaber, the Tov Nun Tes, Siv Beis. The Mechaber brings down that if you left an Isa without any Asuk, after a Shea Mill is Chametz. What's the Shea Mill? Have a Revius, Shah, V'chelik Me'esav and a Shah, which means 18 minutes. But then as some of them knows, there's a big shayla exactly what the Shea Mill is. The Halacha speaks about it in many places. Some shittas hold it 22.5 minutes, some hold this 24 minutes. So the halacha speaks about over here. If Mokum has some room, there's a Mokum to make it. He says the Maisa, you shouldn't be making. So what's clear by us is that we don't have another Isa, or let's say we don't have another Isa, and if it passes 18 minutes, it comes chametz. Okay? The Metzias is it's less than 18 minutes. We don't see any Simon Echimutz. So what's the problem? What's the whole Zeris? What are we worried about? So we have like this. There's Agoyis Maimini, the Beis brings down over here. It brings B'Shem Direim. This is a shtickle, the shlish of the whole sugya. Direim says like this. Shir Zeh. This shir that the Mechaber brings down, who abayis she'em by eish. Avim yesh by eish, there's some fire. Or yisr and chamimus, mishad var, there's something else that's creating some type of chimum. Lefi yisr and chamimus, kefi the amount of chamimus, ma'maya lahachmas. It can come chamas quicker. The tzarich losses leib lefiin. You have to have a seamless slave to be careful that there shouldn't be any extra chamimus that could cause the process to go quicker. And Mordechai also brings this down. This halach, this Yiraim is brought down in the Ramah, in Tofnun Tes, Siv Beis. The Ramah brings down that Yesh lahachmir l'maya bin yasiyas hamatzis. He says, why? Because the chashish here b'mokoim cham shemayel hachmitz. So what we see from over here is that this shear of 18 minutes is not an absolute shear. 18 minutes just means manastam. If there's no outside factors that could quicken the chimutz process, that's when we have 18 minutes, if we don't see any simon chimutz. But if there's something that's going to quicken the process, for example, there's some outside chimum over here, there's Aish, or the house is for some reason hot or something, then we don't have the shear of 18 minutes. And he doesn't really tell us exactly what the shear is. It says, Sorach lost labor for you. So we'll try to go through to give us a gedorim that's a vur in the Pesach about this. So first thing we have is, there's a Gemara, which is also based on this same Yisod. Obviously, the rain really comes from the Gemara, not the Gemara comes from the rain. There's a Gemara in Pesachim, that Mem Beis. The Gemara says like this: Dorish Rova, Isha leitolish b'chama. Isha should make the lisha b'chama. So Rashi, the fisha choim hashemesh mischamemes. The choim hashemesh is going to warm up the Isha. And Mechaber brings this down in Tofnun Tes, Sif Aleph, and Mechaber says, the first Mechaber, Ein loshin b'mokem hashemesh. You're not allowed to do lisha b'mokem hashemesh. Why? Because that could cause chimo, which is this is the same Yisod. And Mishmur explains, Shashemesh mechame isa v'korv la'achmas. That means even though you have 18 minutes, like we saw from the rain, if there's anything that could quicken the process, there's a problem. Now, obviously, the rain has come from this Gemara. But you see that there's something that's going to quicken the process is going to be a problem. The Prima Godma says, this halacha is even if you're in a house. It doesn't have to be. Rava says, you shouldn't losh b'cham. What does it mean? Someone's outside in the chama? Prima Godma says, even if you're in the house. But if the chaloin is pesuach, connected to shemesh, it's a problem. The Shabur brings it down. What happens if the chaloin is not pesuach, but there's a window and the shemesh is coming through the windows? So the Mishabur brings down machlekes hapaiskin, Yosef Cotton base, and the Mishabur says the minig is to be careful. And therefore, Mishabur says that you should cover the windows with sedinim when there's a cham. There's all chatchila. The diavad the Mechaber speaks about sefei. What Allah is. Not going to go into the shadows of the diavad. We're trying to make things lechatchila. Now, there's another very important Gemara. The Gemara in Yuma Daf Chof Ches says like this: Omra Machman, Zuamo de Shimsho, Hoshim Shimsho. Rashi says, Oise Choyim Shoyim Hamunan. The Choyim of Yom Hamunan is more cham. And the Mechaber brings it down. Yom Hamunan also Tachas Kol Averikiyo Shund the Yom the Eva Kula Shimsho. What does it mean? Yom the Eva Kula Shimsho. The Shabur says, Heva Chamo Oz Lahad B'Choyim Boy B'Chol Moker, which means that when it's Yom Hamunan, it's not only exactly connected to Chama, it causes, since the clouds are covering the Chama, it causes that it spreads out over the entire Rekiyah. And according to that, the Ramah brings down, the noble Lizor Milolosh Negar Chaloin Epesuach Afil Ein Sham Shemesh Sheme Yemunan V'Lavadaito. And the Shavur brings down a Murdi Gazach Sivkot and Dalit. Sheteva Hacham Oz Lahag B'Choyim B'Chol Mokim Oz B'Yoyim. Then he says, Vaito, Afil Ein Sham Shemesh Kigoyin Shachaloin Pesuach L'Mizrach V'Losh Acha Chatzois Shekva Soba Cham L'Darm. So the Cham is in a different direction. There's no problem of Lisha Mokim Hashemesh. V'Lochi Yisizori Shema is an Rekia Pisoin. Plagish. I mean, you see a Shemesh and you see it's in the wrong direction. It's different directions. Obviously, there's no problem. But the Mishavur says you have to worry about that maybe all of a sudden it's going to come cloudy. The second it comes cloudy, that causes the Shemesh spreads all over. And maybe there's going to be a problem. So maybe you should be careful that you should never be losh neged achaloy. I was once in a matzah bakery and they had the windows open. So I told him you can't have the windows open. So the guy tries to show me where the direction the sun tries to show me that the sun is not coming that direction. So I told him, it's very nice what you're saying, but there's halacha and shulchan aruch not like that. Halacha is that maybe it's going to come cloudy, and if the second it's going to come cloudy, it's going to be a problem. So maybe that's why you have to keep the windows closed. And that's the reason why you'll see every matzah bakery doesn't have windows. Actually, what I said was windows, no windows in the matzah bakery, but they had trees in there, and the person opened the trees because it was hot. So the workers wanted some air, but really that shloika didn't, because the windows have to be totally closed. What we see from over here is that you're not going to be losh connected to shemesh. Why? Because the lisha connected to shemesh causes extra chim. Now, how much chim is it going to cause already? You can touch the isa. You're not going to feel it's not much very hot. Now for picking that mashu of chimum already could change the 18 minutes that we have. Now, based on this Gemara, there's a Gemara de Rosh. The Rosh says in the second paragraph of Sochem, similar Aleph, he says, "V'chein yira, she'ein nochen lolish korv l'taner, v'pnei chayim eish." You're now to do lisha next to the taner because of the chayim eish. The Mechaber brings it down and says, Aleph, le'yiskarev lolush eitz l'taner, the chayim l'taner, Mishmur, it says, hainu pia taner, not on the sides. But you can't have lisha in front of the taner. Why? Because it's the same idea. Just like you can't be lush in front of the sun, kol shekain, if you're in front of the tanner where it's very hot, it's going to cause the chimum process to go much quicker. And that's why every bakery, you see the area where the lush is a separate room where the oven is, for this reason. Because halach is that you can't have the lisha or the asiya of the dough, anything in the mokum where it's very hot, because that's going to quicken the process, then you lose your 18 minutes. Based on this, Mishnah Berurah says something very important. Mishnah Berurah in Sifkat and Yud says like this: "V'da yeishen nachshalom bezeh, when oifin sheish mehem shebeshosh hamatzis biyodam al hamako leridam l'taner." They take the matzis on the stick. Makar when they saw the piataner, they bring it close to the tanner. Him shoyim. They wait. Because trying to figure out Sifkat and Yud. They're trying to find the exact proper place to put down the matzah. Even worse than that. They chapa shoes with the people that are making the matzahs. Gomer l'fiyam avor. So Mishnah Berurah is saying that's Isur Gomer because that's the halach and Shulchan Aruch that you can't even do lisha keneged piyatana. So obviously to stay in the front of the piyatana with a dough, obviously that's going to be a problem. Now that's mamish medina the Gemara because the Rosh Chodesh says on the Gemara of not loshen pnei hashemesh. Loshen Mishnah Berurah is afil rega. Look in Shuvas Pesach. He says eitz l'tana tzorach l'zor ma'oid shleish klal v'kal. That's why a lot of matzah bakers you'll see they have big fans in front of the piyatana. The reason is because at least the cholapachas we tried to cool off that area as much as we could. It's not going to obviously change the halacha, so you can't sit and shmooze over there. But the cholapachas we try to avoid it. So look, this is something that's very important. Someone's baking matzahs, and you want to have mahur the matzahs, that you should have someone that's a munah to watch when the Shibas bring in the matzah, that he should go in without any shias. Because let's say he's going in, and it happens a lot of time, I've seen it, that someone else passes by him. Maybe he shouldn't have, because mice is someone passed by. Because of that, he got upheld for a second or two. That's a problem. If for some reason there were a lot of matzahs in there, he had to wait for a second or two. Also, that's a problem. These matzahs, shouldn't be taken. But they're a klal, any good matzah baker, I've watched it. If they take a seat that something happened, that someone stopped them or something, they'll just put the matzah on the floor because they realize this is a chamatik problem. But the Sheba was once been a matzah baker also, that for some reason the Sheba, I don't know, trying to figure out why, but when he bought the matzahs, he went like straight and then like went up. The Sheba is the one that puts in the matzahs. Puts the matzahs out. He's standing right in front of the oven. What happens is, let me explain. What happens is that there's someone that carries a stick with the matzah on it from the room where the matzahs are made. He hands it over to the sheber. He brings it into the oven, and then there's someone else that takes it out. So the guy bringing it is called the sheber. He brings it in. Now, if they're a klal, you watch the matzah bakery, the good ones, they bring it in mamish as quick as possible. Obviously, even though it takes a second, that is obviously you can't say that will be a problem. But if there's anything that's more than that, that's going to create a problem. And those matzahs, the Mishnah Berurah says even kerega, those matzahs is a problem of pi ataner, I heard that Ramosha, this is one of the big zaps that Moshe was very busy with, that to make sure that there shouldn't be any shias for Piyatana, because that's not Chumash. This is Mamish big radin.
That's because it's next to the
No, so that's what we mentioned. It's in a separate room, so that doesn't have that problem. But they have a wall there in between, and there's a door. That's good. That's good. Yeah, right, that's enough. That's enough. That's not called. Right, no, right. No, there's an opening of a door. No, I don't mean the door's closed. I'm saying that there's something blocking it. Most of the time, also the leash itself is done like in its own thing. But even the aricha could be, but they're very careful that the room should be very cool. And it is blocked directly from the Tana. The Tana is not directly connected. There's a wall connected. Pashas, the aricha is the same thing. Yes, if anything, we'll see. I don't know. We'll talk about today. The aricha is much closer to the Tana, and the aricha it's clear in the Paiskim, which I don't think we'll get to it today, is that there's more of a chash chimutz when you're holding by the aricha than when you're holding by the lisha. So no, the Mishnah Berurah doesn't speak about the lisha. The Mechaber speaks about the lashon makom. Okay, Mishnah Berurah is talking about when the shiva brings it in. No, but we already know that ein lashon makom hashemesh, and they'll go to that thing. I'll be lost with the tannerets. So you can't. The aricha room cannot be in the same room with the tannerets. So that's the mitzvah. It's a separate room. Now, the Shabur is telling you he understands that's a separate room, but you have to go into the room to put the matzah in. That the Shabur says when you bring it in, you go in as quick as possible. And if there's someone that's going to be mad of you, or you're going to start choosing, then you're going to create a problem. There are of course variations, because when you're talking about in the place. So we're going to speak about every single process. If Adam doesn't know what the process is, I assume Adam does know. I could explain the process. Right. Okay. So Rabbi Gaddisman says we'll explain the process. The way the process in all matzah bakers, everyone's a little bit different, but the basic idea is that there's someone standing in between two small rooms, and he has a bowl. In that bowl, the bowl is clean, it's empty. And from one window, one side opens up, and they pour some flour in. After that window is closed, someone pours from an opposite window, pours the water in, then quickly makes a lisha. After he does the lisha, he takes that and he brings it to what they call thinners. Every bakery is different. So that's what I'm saying. We're going to get to those points. We're going to get there. And I just want to explain the process. They bring it to the thinners. They make a couple of those one after another. They bring it to the thinners. There's normally, let's say in Lakewood Bakery, there's 5 thinners. That means they put on a table. They have these metal rods that bang it down. The taxes to that is thinners. I don't know what type of word it is, but that's what they call it. Thinners. They make the isa very, very right. In other words, because when a person does it in his hand, it's very hard for him to do it well. There's no mixer. So he's like a metal rod and hit down on the isa, and it makes it very long. So what happens after the thinners bang it down? They have a chachma. They make it into like a log like this. Then comes to a guy that cuts that log in half. Then he takes each part of that log and rolls each part of that log to make it the proper tzura of a log. Then there's another guy that cuts that log into, we call it half balls. Half balls means it's like a slice, and then it's brought to another table, and the guy hands out pieces to the maschilim who start the lisha. Then from there it goes to the goyim rim who make the lisha to finish the lisha. He throws it to them. The goyim then throw it to the one that the redler. Then there's another guy. Then the redler throws it to another guy, and he puts it on top of the stick. And there's another guy that takes from the stick, gives it to the person putting it in the oven, Shiber, and there's another guy that takes it out of the oven. There's a lot of steps. Exactly. There's the one that puts in the water. There's the one that puts in the flour. The one that puts in the water. The one that needs it. There's the thinners, but there's 5 or 6 of them. and then there's the one that makes the log, cuts it in half. Then there's the one he normally cuts into pieces. Then there's someone that gives out the pieces. We'll see about that. Then there's maschilim, which is a lot of maschilim. There's goimrim. Then there's the one that does the what do you call it, the red look. And then there's the one that takes it from the red look and puts it on the stick. There's the one that brings the stick to the shiva, the one that puts it in the oven. The one that takes out the matzah from the oven. Those are the basic. So this is right. So this is what we're going to be talking about. I'm first giving the basic yisaidus, and then we're going to speak about what you could do to make it better. But one thing, what we just mentioned now, is that the zirus is that you should have someone standing by the oven watching that there shouldn't be any shiyas piyatana. If there's a shiyah piyatana, you don't take that matzah. Yeah. No. So the derech klal, if it's a real big thing, is I've seen it. Matzah bakers, they know. They throw. They know that's a serious problem. But sometimes the guy maybe didn't realize. So you keep it right in front of the account. Right. Ramish right in front of the account. That means obviously it could be many reasons. What I've seen, sometimes there's someone that crossed in front of him. Could be someone from the Chabur crossed in front of him. Well, maybe have a Pesach Mishpah child if he's allowed to do that, but he'll have to pay for the matzah. Cross in front of him. There could be, it was a derech klal. It's not a problem because of the backup, because they're pretty organized to know how much matters, but it could be when the guy was taking it out, he had to wait, but they're very organized. The derech klal, good matzah bakery, that they have it down to science that he's bringing in, he's taking out. So, the derech klal, it's pretty good. The derech klal, matzah bakers I've seen, they're matzah bakers, they're very good. And in the normal situation, you don't have to piyatana. But if there's a crack, that means if someone passes by or something, that's when the problem is. But normally they go in very good. Right. I mean, let's say here's the oven. The guy's bringing it in, and someone cuts him off. He doesn't realize the guy's coming in. So let's say someone's passing by, trying to get the way he's supposed to be going. He really shouldn't be there. You're right. Really, there shouldn't be people coming in. But the Matthias says sometimes, and what happens is it's not so much in front of the sheber, I would say, because the sheber is standing right in front of the oven, so no one's really facing by here. It's more the guy that's coming with the stick that's giving it to the sheber. So he's bringing the stick like this, and then almost before he hands it to the guy, all of a sudden someone cuts him off, but he's already in front of the tanner. So something like that, was a problem. But the times that I've seen it, when it was a real problem, I saw the guy. Just flips the matzah on the floor because they know that matzah is, is a problem. It sounds, obviously it takes a certain amount of time to bring the matzah from that place to into the oven. Is it 2 seconds, 1 second, whatever amount of time it is? That's literally matzah. We obviously have to bring it in, so that's not a problem. But the klal always with these things is whatever you have to do. So obviously, that's not a problem. But anything that's more than that, right? Anything that's more than that, obviously that could be a problem. Okay, let's continue. Mishabura says another important kuda here. Mishabura says the same sif cotton. Mishabura says v'chein oid yesh yizar. Another thing you have to be careful. Lahachlif hamaklis. They have to switch the maklis. Shemesimim alei hamatzis. Kipam bepam. Why? The honor roim bechush shem scham mahar b'machma shohi betamer. Umachma zeh. It means they have sticks. So what do? They're taking out, they bring in the matzahs with a stick, and they take it out with a shovel. And when they bring it in with a stick, obviously that stick is getting hot. So he says, don't use, if you're going to use the same stick, then the stick is going to be hot. So now the Moshe and Shuvas and the Chazon Ish both say that when the Mishabur over here says hot, doesn't, now sometimes it can be mamish boiling hot, but they say it doesn't have to be mamish boiling hot. Even if it's yatzalah, even if it's just a little bit warm, that could create a problem. And the reason for that is because the klal is any amount of extra chimun could create a problem. So Mela, you have to be careful that the maklois, when they're going in, that means when you're putting the new matzah from the redler onto the stick, that stick should not even be warm. The Kaf HaChaim says that they have to be careful that before you use the sticks, the place of storage shouldn't be next to the apiya tanner, because if you're going to store it next to the tanner, they're going to get warm. Besides getting warm from the tanner itself, they can get warm by where you're storing it. In the lake of matzah baker, for example, they have it stored on the side of the tanner, but really right after it comes out of the tanner, they have big fans blowing on the place where they keep the sticks to cool them off. Now, it used to be. So we'll explain that. It used to be that I could say the lake of matzah bakery. It used to be that they had a fan, and then they just kept on reusing it, and they assumed that it was good. The Ma'aseh, this is one of the things that I saw that was a bit of a problem, because the Metzius was, what happens is that we'll see soon what they do. They cover the sticks. So the goyim, basically, they just kept on taking the sticks, and I saw the Metzius was that it was warm sometimes, or borderline warm before I went back in. So I had a special munna that he was in charge of the sticks, and he put all the sticks that were used that round in one corner, and we only used the sticks that was used 18 or half an hour before. So therefore, what time the sticks are being used again, it's already at least a half an hour, so then they're ready to eat. Now, down in the matzah baker here now, a couple of years ago, I was more than this in the Kuda, and they made a color code system, which means that let's say they have, for example, let's say 400 sticks, 100 for each 100. So they made different colors on the bottom of it: green, orange, red, purple. And the goyim know that every color is for a different round. So let's say they know every round, every 18 minutes, let's say they need normally 100 sticks, for example. They have at least 100 sticks, that's 120 sticks. Therefore, they know that every round is a new thing. So Melo, you're at least having 18 minutes. Besides this, getting cooled off with the fan, you have at least 18 minutes in between, so it's cooling off by then. I had an interesting story. I baked matzahs last week, and so I have someone in charge, and the guy tells me that they're reusing the sticks. So I went over to the guy and I said, "What's going on?" I said, "Why don't you use the?" So he says, "All the colors." The guy says, "No, the boss says that the color green is for the next time. I can't use green now." So he was reusing. What happened was, for some reason, there was a shortage, but the guy didn't have, so he didn't have. The whole point of using a different color was to cool down. So he was reusing the ones I had them. So obviously we stopped them. Everything worked out. No, we stopped this before. You have to understand. What happens is the goyim take a whole stack of 25, 30 and put it on the top next to where the red is. So we saw him bringing a new stack there, and we saw he was taking it from the ones that were just used. So we stopped him, and he got what's going on. So the boss came and he said, "No, you can't use these." So we ended up using the next color, and it worked out. Like this is here is that has to be done. I wouldn't want to take any sticks out of the matzah bakery. You're already getting into what's going to be. That's a place that's good. That's what I'm saying. In Lake Matzah Bakery, they have a big fan. It happens to be I've washed a lot of chavurs, so the fan's not on. But when I'm there, I turn on the fan, and the fan cool. The system they make is good. Yeah, it's a huge. But it sits right under the fan. There's huge fans, and the top of the stick, which is very hot, is blowing on that. And then added to that, you're waiting the fourth round. So really, you should be waiting an hour later on. So really, if the system is running, that means it's on top of it. It's a good system. Now, very interesting. If it's in Bur, you look in the Friedrich Paiskim, when they used to bring the matzahs into the oven, they used a marble. Use a shovel. When they take out the matzah, they use a shovel. How they used to bring it in? They used to bring it in also with a shovel. With a shovel, right? Today, they use sticks. Kazish says that this minute to use sticks. Mishmur say also talks about sticks. When does minute start? Kazish writes and say that this minute started this man of the goyim. He says the goyim firayin to start using sticks. Why? Because since using a marda is really an expensive thing. A shovel. The more before that a certain Ethereum that metal shovel. A certain Ethereum they allow to use even a goyish not like a matzah that. Someone's in a place and they only have a tray for marda, so any ben yom you're allowed to use it. Even though the halach is now allowed to use any ben yom to get clean, but since it's an expensive thing, there's a special emphasis. The Gemara is always back in Shulchan Aruch Yodei Sim Kuf Chesed Beis. Straloch. So it wasn't like something, even a matzah bakery. If they have to have separate shovels, we have to have hundreds of shovels. They're expensive. But sticks are cheaper things. So he says, going firayin that they should use sticks. because this way you could keep on switching it. Right. You could have much more. Right. That's what Chazon says. Going figure it out. You were able to have much more. Yeah, it's not so much. The main thing is it should be something that is a much cheaper product. So it's right. It was expensive. Well, we'll see. So we'll speak about that. We'll speak about it in a second. The wood and the metal. It could be one way. There's a mile with the metal. We'll get to in a second. But like upon this, the kuda that they use sticks is a new thing. No, they take it out with the shovel. Like you can't take it out with a stick because the matzah is now. But there they have a couple shovels. They have a couple shovels. We don't care when the matzah is coming out. If the matzah, they take out normally the one or two other shots. We'll speak about that. I don't forget that, but normally depends. Some chavuos are makbid one at a time, but that's a separate shayla. How much? Right. But the better once it's finished baking, it's not such a question. Oh, now there's another problem with the sticks. There's another Mishnah Berurah in Sifkat Lamed Beis. Mishnah Berurah in Sifkat Lamed Beis says like this. Ba'im Pri Megodim, the Sifkat Lamed Beis. Ba'im Pri Megodim shekos at the nochel upon the livduik. The lira is gama mardo. So in the Pri Megodim's time they used the mardo. We use today a makro. Gama mardo shemachnisa ba'matzas lataner. Imenu lebetzek. The lapamim ksheisa raka nidbaka lebetzek. That means the problem is if the betzek is going to get stuck to the stick. So you have to check it to make sure that there's no betzek. Now, so we'll explain exactly what the issue is. What's the problem with this? So really there's two separate problems you could have. One problem is that there was betzek there. That betzek that's there got neschametz because that betzek could be sitting for a longer period of time. Now when you put another isa in that place, it's going to come out, then it's going to answer that isa. How much is it going to answer it? So the Mechaber in Tov Samachal of Sivdal says like this: That means if you would have a piece of matzah that touched another matzah that's chametz, it answers it kedei netila. Now those days the matzah were much thicker. The way our matzahs are, they're very thin, so the whole matzah is kedei netila. The Shabur already says it's in Tov Nun Aleph, Sifkat and Kufir Aleph, because netila is kasher esfa. Now that's one chash. There's another chash is that let's say you had an isa that was left on it. Now that isa was neschametz. Now when you're going to put that into the oven, there's going to be a bliya that went into the stick. Now once the bliya went into the stick, even if that isa is not there, if someone's going to put another mat on that, now when you stick the stick in the oven and the stick gets hot, it's going to answer it. Even though everyone knows the cloud of aim below yoitzav li roited. That means if you have a bli in something, it doesn't go out without roited. But the halacha is when it's in a kli, it goes out without roited. So if you have a makro that has a bli of chametz, it will ask for the matzah. Shach says in kufhei sif zayin, it asks for kedei kli. No, there's no difference. No difference. So it comes out that we could have two separate issues. But the Mishnah Berurah says from the Pri Megodim, they have to be careful to clean up the isa from the makul. There's two separate issues that you could have. There's one issue that you could have is that putting the new matzah directly on top of that piece of isa, and once you're putting it directly on that piece of isa, it's going to come out that isa will be in a chametz. How much? Kedei netila, because a matzah chametz is going to answer another matzah kedei netila, which the Mishnah Berurah says in Hilchos that's the whole matzah. That matzah is very thin. Another chash is even if that is not there anymore, but if it was there when it went into the oven and it was a chametz, so now there's a bliya in the stick, then you're going to put another matzah and it's going to answer. These are the two chashas that you have. Well, that's why there are a lot of people that are machmir and they make sure that they use the sticks that are in ben yoyim. This way they avoid the problem of any blias. If there's any ben yoyim, Right. If there's any b'yoymoy, that it's, we'll get to that in a second. If it's any b'yoymoy, so then it's nice and tam l'pgam. And mitzad at the end, they sand it down. I used to bake years ago. I used to bake in Satmar. So Satmar, I don't know by everyone, but when we had the chibur, they had put aside, for the olam, they put aside upstairs, they had sticks from that we weren't used within 24 hours, and they sand it down. So maybe you avoid both problems. You avoid the problem of blias, because it's already any ben yoyim, even though we know the noise tam l'pgam is a problem on Pesach, but it's only on Pesach. But a noise tam l'pgam that goes on before Pesach is not a problem. And it's at the end, there's no problem because I sand it down, so we take off any ben that's there. We're going to sand it down, yeah. You could. It's a machine. I've seen it. Yeah. They don't go like this. No. I saw it. No. I've seen it. There's a machine that goes into it, and it comes out. Yeah. It's obviously sanded down very, very mashed, but once the mashed, it can pick up any bend that's there. So we'll get to that. There's a good point you say. So now the question is, the guy wants to be more of an kuda. And this is another problem with the sticks that I've seen, that if we have a wooden stick, sometimes there could be a crack and something gets stuck in. So there are class saying we get that off. But let's say you're not sanding down. Nice, if something gets stuck, and that could be a problem. So it happens to be like a matzah baker. Just recently, a couple years ago, they switched sticks from wooden sticks to metal sticks, which metal sticks has this milo because there's less chashes of gumus. It's much more of a smooth, which is right. So we'll get to what it do. Now over here, they do something else, which maybe I heard other bakers also do, but they do something else which is very good. What they do is on every single, every single stick, what they do is they cover with a piece of paper. Looks like an edge of shoulder. They also do that because I've seen a recent girl that speaks about this. They put on the stick a piece of paper, let's say till here, where not more when the matzah is going to go. They cover with a rubber band over here and a rubber band here. The matzah goes directly on the paper, and then they bring it in. If the matzah comes out, they're going to rip off the paper. They put it in the fan to cool it off. If it comes out from being cooled, then they put on a new paper. Now, that's a good try. So doing this, you avoid both channels. Problem number one is mitzad, the isa, they get stuck onto the, now it's on the paper. That's my fault. Now the guy was asking another point. Okay, what about mitzad the blias? The answer mitzad that we have a klal in your day in many places. Mentioned 2 places, Tzadi Basic Zion, Yodeya, Tzadi Gimel. There's a klal of ein bliya yoytzim mekli lekli b'lei reitiv, which means if you have 2 kelim and there's no reitiv in between, blias can go. Example, if someone has on the fire, many times people ask, they have a fleshig pat, a milchig pat, they shouldn't be next to each other, but happens to be punk, they touch each other. So if there's leichas in between, that could be already a shayla. If they're both clean, again, a lot of times people ask, you have a fleshig pat that's clean, but it's full of patsu, and sometimes they put it down on a clean countertop, or whatever it is, but on a milchig countertop, it's not gonna answer. Even on Pesach, a lot of times people have a Pesach in the kitchen, but how it happens, I don't know. But I can tell you, I've gotten the shayla that someone took Pesach pot with Pesach stuff in it and put it down on a chumash burn. If everything is clean and it's not wet, it will not ask. You're not allowed to do it. This isn't the Mesilas Chatchila. But with the Evet, the blias can't go clear without any type of rain. So this is what they do. Nice avoids a lot of problems. They have it made out of metal, so you don't have any problem with gumis. Mitzad the ben, when you take off the paper, you avoid that problem. Mitzad the blias not going in. Now, there's another thing that you could maybe clear. There's a strict problem. Sometimes what happens is that for whatever reason, when they bring in the matzah, for whatever reason, it goes on fire. Maybe they put it too close to the fire. The matzah goes up. The matzah goes on fire. When they bring in the matzah, and they're sticking it in, sometimes a little flame, and either maybe part of matzah stays there, which that's fine. But sometimes they pull out the stick on flames. No, the enemy's pulling it out. Look, they want to move the stick. It's not good to make ash to the whole fire. There's matzah going on over there. So they're pulling out the stick. Now, sometimes there could be a little isa left on that thing. So what's the chash? Now, maybe because there's a flame on the paper, now it's going to be exposed, the thing itself. But I don't think that's a problem for we're exposed to the stick itself. Because the paper is burned through, right? So I don't think that's a problem because if there are clouds, if the fire is burning the paper, whatever piece is left, that's also going to be burnt. Even if not, there's a Mishnah Berurah in Hilchos Hechsher Kalim, Simon Tofnan Aleph, Sid Dallas speaks about a chatzuba. Chatzuba is a burner. Berurah speaks about really make a din, you have to kash your burners for Pesach. And he says it's just a chumrah. The reason he says is it's a chumrah. No, I say you have to kash it. Yeah, right. But if someone cooked on it without, so Mishnah Berurah says the reason why it's only a chumrah, he says two reasons. First of all, when you're cooking on Pesach, you're cooking on Pesach, he says it's clear to clean. There's no right, like we said before. That's why it's on the chumrah. Second of all, he says, because it was the chashash, there may be something once spilled on it. But he says that since something spilled on a fire directly, it's established, it got burnt before his nifla b'sayim. That's as far as the Mishnah Berurah says, not the Mishnah Berurah swore, it's before, I think the Mark. See, other Achronim say this swore. Right. So I don't want to get into Hilchos Hechsher Kalim. It's a good point what you're saying. Good point. But that's what Mishnah Berurah says. So here also, I'm just worried about maybe something got exposed. And maybe a little matzah touched that. I'm just saying, but in the worst scenario, even if it didn't get burnt, but the sword that the thing is on fire, it's not going to. So that's why you don't have to so much worry about it. It's got a very interesting, there's a Negeres Chazanish, right? There's a Geras that goes to different hanogas you should have. So he writes over there that when you make the Isa, you shouldn't make it very watery, because he says if it's too watery, then there's more of a chash, it's going to get stuck onto the sticks. Okay, so what comes out is that and that's what the Chazish brings down from the Goyin already, is that we bring the sticks in, we bring it in with sticks, this way we can keep on switching them. The sticks should be cold, shouldn't be even warm, like Rav Moshe Chazish says, and you have to be careful that there's no bad left on the sticks, and you have to make sure that fleas didn't go in. So I said the Moshel here with the matzah bakery, they have it's covered, so there's no problem with them, and also it can go with clean, and you take it a problem that it shouldn't be. But these are zeros that you have to know. This is not stammer chumra ba'amah. This is something Mishnah Berurah brings down. That's what they have. That's what they have over here, metal sticks, which I think is afuke wood. You know, if the matzah bakery doesn't have it, you can't. Very hard to switch what they have. But you have to be careful to make sure that there's no gumas there. But even there's gumas there, depends what they're using. If they're sanding it down, you have to see if they're sanding it down or not. Or if they're covering it, so you're covering it, it really doesn't really make a difference. Okay, let's see Ramshik a little bit further. Now, so till now we still the back that you have 18 minutes, and if you have once you have 18 minutes, you're pretty safe, unless you did something that started the chimon process. To make it go quicker. But without that, you have 18 minutes. The Maisha is Mavur the Gemara that even if there's nothing, the case of the Gemara, they have 18 minutes. There was no extra special something here to quicken the chimon process. Afa pikein, lachatchila, a person is not supposed to leave the Isa without Isaac, even correct. Where's the Makodas halacha? This Makodas halacha is a Gemara Pesachim Daf Mem Beis. The Gemara says, Rashi says, the Mechaber brings this down in Siv Beis, often Siv Beis. The Mechaber brings down then the Mechaber says, that means even though you have 18 minutes, but 18 minutes only the end. But lachatchila, you're not supposed to leave it without an Asik, even correct. That means once they make the lisha, you're not allowed to leave it for Asik even for a second. Now, what does it mean a second? You know, second sometimes a lot of times we find a second. There's love after a second. You know, it just means for a given period of time. So let's try to figure out for the poskim itself what the share, if there's a share in this. We have a mechaber in Sivov. Mechaber in Sivov is like this. What happens if someone made an Isa that was Raka? It wasn't a good Isa. So now a person, they want to eat kemach. That's the simplest way to eat kemach. Mechaber says you shouldn't do that because it's not going to be nivel yafa, and then you can get a problem. So what should you do? You should make another Isa that's a little bit thicker, and then you mix the two Isas. So Mr. Bura says over there something very interesting. Mr. Bura brings down a sif called Mem Gimel, says Kosva Koinim. Who should make that other Isa? Kosva Koinim, the other Macha Yas Isa Kosher, who ba'atzim you have to lolish the Ishas Kachas. Who's asabim yafa. So if Mr. Bura, you have to have someone else do the Isa. Why? Because one person can't do both Isas. Elamai is up to Mr. Bura. Okay, so I'll leave Isa number one on the side, and I'll make another Isa. So up to Mr. Bura, Laniach Isa is trying to do the Asik, Einoch Lachatchila, Lachatchila, not B'diavad. B'diavad you have 18 minutes. Einoch Lachatchila, I feel the Rega Echad, Kalabas at base. I'm not going to B'diavad, of us in less, because B'diavad you have 18 minutes. But Lachatchila, you're not allowed to leave it even a Rega. We're going to see. We're going to talk about Mitzvah Sheet as a rush. Oh, yeah. Oh, right. Now, so how long does it take to make another Isa? How long does it take to make Isa? You look at matzah breaking, maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds. So that's clear in the Mishnah Berurah. Right? Okay, let's say a minute. So you can't leave it. That's called in Mishnah Berurah, that you can't leave it the amount of time to make another Isa. That nichla on this correct. But I have a raya. I never saw anyone speak about what no, but the evidence is good. But the evidence you have till 18 minutes. Right. The question is this dilachatchila. So I have a raya, and when we talk about the chatchila, it shouldn't be karega. It means rega kamashmoy mamash. I have a raya. I didn't say anyone bring this raya, but I have a raya brura that it's karega. Baruch Hashem already is b'shmi already in a couple of places, but a raya brura that it's L'rega's mamash. What's the raya? There's a mechaber in Tof Nun Zayin Sefalef. Mechaber says they're very interesting. It says like this. Talks about the oifen to be mafresh chalef on Isa. Mechaber says that when you mafresh chalef, it says l'chein toiv l'karve Isas yachad b'shas afosos chalef sheyeshuku zuzu. That means if you have a lot of different Isas, so when menashik the two Isas together, that's halacha and challah that we need to make that frosha, the should be neshika. So the karvi Isas yachad, simple meaning means that you have 3 or 4 different Isas, you put them together. The Magen Avraham brings down a shlah that there was a minute the people misunderstood as halacha, and they thought it meant not 2 different Isas. They thought it meant one Isa, that you have one Isa, like this, let's say a log, and they thought it meant that you should connect the 2 ends of the Isa when you take off challah. That's what they understood it meant. And the shlah says that that's not ein enoch. So the achronim amadayik from Lashon Shlah, and if you look in the shlah inside, it's clear that way. The why say ein enoch? You can say, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. The Lashon Shlah says ein enochim is masha that not only you don't have to do it, but it's wrong. That means al pi halacha they're doing something wrong. So break the opinion of God and the Machzor Shekel. What are they doing wrong? Okay, so tell them they don't have to do that. What are they doing wrong? There's something wrong with taking the 2 ends of the Isa and like this. Okay. So you know what the pshat is? You know why it's wrong? Because we just learned this halacha and Tofnun tests that you're not allowed to leave an Isa the rega. So so I have to take off my cautious challah. Obviously, today we take off challah and that's a separate nice. But those days you used to take off challah before. So he says if you have to take off challah, okay, that's part of the making process. So you can't be yoytz v'den lachatchila. But if anyone is doing anything more than he's supposed to be doing, right? Doing anything more than he's supposed to be doing, it comes out that now not only is he wasting his time, he's doing something else I have to do. What's happening is he's not being oisig that second. And maybe he's being vatal his din. So he says that's what the shlosh says, it's ein enochim because they're not going to be mekayim the din lachatchila during that second. So you see that when we talk about kerega here, kerega means mamish rega. Rega kamash moy, because how long does it take to take an isa, a piece of dough, and connect the two sides? You want to argue, want to tell me 2 seconds? 2 seconds. 2 seconds. So you see clear from the Mishnah Berurah, from the Pri Megadim, that's Nechon des Halach. Weiter is another Mishnah Berurah, and Sivkot Yud Ches, and speaks about the sheet of the Rosh, which Mitzvah will speak about next time. The sheet of the Rosh is that at a given point in the making of the dough, which we'll speak about in Mitzvah next year, what that point is. But at one point of making the dough, the halacha is that it comes in chametz miyad. If you're not being oisik. That Mishnah Berurah speaks about over there doesn't mean miyad means mamish or not mamish. So Mishnah Berurah says maybe it's lav dafka. The shimu. But he says lechatchila. Anyways, you have to be yizor, not leaving rega echad, because we anyways learned that lechatchila you shouldn't be the rega echad. So it's clear in the Mishnah Berurah that rega echad means mamish k'mashmoy. In the sheet is a rosh that says it, so probably with Yevid, then he says that you can't say maybe it's slav dafka mamish or rega. The asher b'diyev. But lechatchila, it's clear in the Mishnah Berurah that it's a problem. So now let's talk about a little bit. Let's talk about a little bit what's called basic. So, what do you mean? Yeah, right. So I'm saying for the Pri Megadim is clear that reg is it's mamish. Obviously, if you can't, you can't. But there's all the shayla lechatchila. What's called asik? So Mishnah Berurah says in Sivkot Yud Beis like this: asik mikri shalosh soy. That means you're kneading it. Megalgo beitz. Megalgo beitz means like when they make the aricha. You know, when you're making a thing, you're taking over with a piece of wood and you're rolling on it. That means they bang on one side. It says that's only going to help for one side. It's not going to help for the other side. Mishnah Berurah is in Sivkot Yud Beis. Weiter, there's a mechaber, Tofnun Vav Sif Alt, and Mechaber says that is when you make isa for Pesach or for matzahs, you're not supposed to make a big isa. You're not supposed to make an isa bigger than the sheikhal. The max is a sheikhal. People think it's less than a sheikhal. It's not less than sheikhal. The max is the sheikhal. Why? So to Mishnah Berurah, why can you make coming from the shayna? Why can you make an isa that's bigger than the sheikhal? Because Chazal Mashaya that the sheikhal is the amount of time that a person could do a proper asik. But if it's bigger than the sheer challah, it's much harder to do a proper asik. So what's called the asik? So asik, let's say people want to know, let's say you have on a matzah on a stick and you're shaking it. Is that called an asik? So Avarai, that's not an asik. The Rashban Truvas brings down that Ramban used to prepare the isa in one house, and they would walk with the stick to another house where the Tana was. The Daki Moshe asked that according to the Shittas of the Rosh, which Ramesh will speak about next year, that holds that after a Richa, it comes as chametz miyad. If you don't do an asik, so he says all the Ramban's matzahs will chametz. As I think Daki Moshe, I don't understand what's the kasha. Maybe the Ramban shook the stick, so it's clear that obviously he had no eitzah. He didn't have any eitzah. So an asik has to be some who in the paiskim. Another asik means that there's an asik gomer in the thing. But if you just touch it, that's not considered an asik. So in this Grella speaks about, let's say when you're cutting the isa, so he says, so obviously since there's a lot of pressure from the knife, so that's called an asik in that spot. He says not an asik in another spot. Asik means there's a full force, full pressure on the dough. Now, so a person will say, okay, if I can't do a proper asik, so okay, and lo yoil, lo yazik, but that's a mistake. If you could do a proper asik, good, but if you can't do a proper asik, you're making things worse. There's a maril and Hilchos matzah. Maril says like this: after they make the isa and it's not ready to go into the oven. So what do? They touch it. They touch like this and they rub it. It's maril and Hilchos matzah. So he says, and people do that. Why? They say shaloyim menachim pnuyim ein by mamish. Ain't a misasik. He says that the reason why people do it The reason why people do it is because they say that the matzah can't be funny without an asik. He says that's not called asik. It's fakert. You be mechamad the matzah. No, because they touching with your hand on top. You know, even you're not doing asik, that's mechamad the matzah. Same thing the Daki Moshe brings. No, this is freestanding from the fire. This is nothing to do with the fire. Once the hands touching it, that's mechamad the matzah, unless you do it asik, because asik prevents the chimus. The Marival says, "Lahav yodav al matzahs loy mikri asik klal." The adraba mechamad yisum mishvur brings it down a sifkot and chabez. Avoloy mahani mashamav yodav al matzahs mashafshiv. The zel loy mikri asik. The adraba oid god mechamad yisab yodav. Right? Just touching it. Exactly. Not only that, so I mentioned before that the Magen brings down a shlo. Magen brings down a shlo that the shlo says that there was a minute that the people used to touch the two ends of the Isa together. So the shlo says it's ein enochen. So I mentioned before the people go to the shot why it's ein enochen. The reason why it's ein enochen is because at that time you're not doing any Isa. That's the people go. The Machas Shekel says a different shot. And the Machas Shekel's pshat is a pshat. If you look in the shlo inside, that's the pshat the shlo says. The shlo says an unbelievable thing. He says, you know what the problem is? Not only you're not doing an Isa. The shlo says you're touching the Isa for no reason. If you're touching the Isa for no reason, you're creating chimo. I mean, it's not an Isa. And then you're touching for no reason. If you're touching for no reason, you're creating more chimo in the matzah. So it's a problem. So maybe the rule of thumb is like this: if you could do a full asik, then the klal is that avada you have to do an asik. You're not supposed to leave the matzah for 1 second without an asik. But if there's going to be a scenario in the process of the baking of the matzah that you can't do an asik gama for whatever reason, then it's better to leave the matzah and not touch it. Because since you're not doing an asik, by touching it, all you're doing is creating chimam, and you're creating a bigger problem. Because remember, if a matzah is not touched, you have 18 minutes. Now, you have to have asik. But if you're going to do an asik that's not a proper asik, you're creating a bigger problem. So if you're for sure that the asik you're doing is good, shalom Yisrael. But if you're doing an asik that's not a good asik, you're making worse. So maybe don't touch it. It's very hard. It's something that we don't know. So we're going to have to stop here now. And Mitzvah Shem next year, 57 minutes. So the next year, Mitzvah Shem, the first part of the share, we're gonna try to bring to Lamaisa of what we spoke about. We're going to go through the whole process of the baking of the matzah and to go through in the process what things that are done is considered asik, what's not asik, and which times a person maybe shouldn't touch the matzah or not. And also Mitzvah will speak about next time the shita of the Rosh. What is the shita of the Rosh, and what's the bigger problem, and what we could do to avoid any problems. Okay, HaRav.